Hi, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chat for today. It's near the end of July. It's July 25th, 2024. Another great day to be an evaluator. Um, we're really lucky to have Kurt and Azucena. Sana? Okay, I tried. I'm working on it. Here to present to us about the evaluation position descriptions that they've gathered from within our community. And I asked Kurt, have you made it easier for us to discuss with our family at Thanksgiving what we do for a living? And I'm afraid he's only made it more confusing. But anyway, I'll let him take it from here, and his colleague Azucena, and go take it away. And I'm looking forward to hearing that conversation.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone. We in San Antonio are like many organizations or like many communities where we don't have an organized group of evaluators, and that there are people doing evaluation who don't realize they're doing evaluation. And what we wanted to do is start a project to organize the community and to provide professional development to those who need it, but to get the community talking to each other. And so we started this community-wide initiative and really launched it March 1st of last year, so in March of 2023. And what I want to do is change a slide. There we go. There are several contributors to it. Azucena is working on her master's degree at University of Michigan. She's with us for the summer, and she has been analyzing a number of the job descriptions. Fran, Sarah, Pisha are all part of my team that have worked on this. Katie, Candice, Michelle are advisors. John and Nazish have contributed. So even though I'm standing here in front of you talking, really there's a number of people who have contributed to this project. And like many communities, we do not have many evaluators in San Antonio, and this is one reason why we're doing well, and I can take the lead in it because there simply aren't many to organize. It really is a small community. The challenge is it's fragmented, so we do have to work to get like a snowballing approach to meeting people. The big issue is a lack of professional identity. People don't know that evaluation as a career exists. They don't know about courses. The students taking courses don't even know that AEA exists. And then there's a whole group of people called everyday evaluators that work in the nonprofits. And I'll come back to that in a little bit, but they're part of the community that don't identify as evaluators, and yet they're required to do evaluation. So they're part of the pool of this San Antonio Evaluator Pipeline project that we put together to organize the community. What we have done differently in this is rather than talk about people being in independent school districts or higher education or nonprofits, we look at what role they're playing. So that some people are in more of an educator role. Companies and many of us sit in the provider slot, that we're providing evaluation services to other people, and then there are the consumers that hire us. But one person can wear three different hats. So there's a guy named John at our local university. He is a professor in sociology. He teaches a program evaluation course. He has a small business that provides program evaluation services to the state of Mississippi. So he's at CDC giving presentations at various times. But I met him because he was a consumer. He hired us to help write a proposal where we would be the external evaluator. So John is an educator, a provider, and a consumer. And so we talk about the way these three groups interact. So a nonprofit can be in the educator side, can be on the provider side, can be on the consumer side. And so we look at how these groups interact. And that makes a difference when it comes to telling the educators what kind of skill sets the providers need and what kind of skill sets the consumers need, and to help the consumers understand what professional development they may need to seek for their folks. Okay, this is the same words in text. For those of you on YouTube, you can pause it and read, but we'll go on. So this is the slide that talks about the everyday evaluators. 80% of the nonprofits in San Antonio have 10 employees or less. Who's doing the evaluation? Sometimes it's the CEO or executive director. Sometimes it's the grant writer that's collecting the data for grants. It's one or two people, probably not formally trained in evaluation, and most likely have never heard of AEA. They don't consider themselves evaluators, but they're doing it because so many of our nonprofits are so small that someone is doing it. And that's part of the community that we want to, that's fragmented, that's unidentified, that we want to bring into the evaluator pipeline project. Okay, so here's the bulk of the presentation. So one of the things that we started doing a little over a year ago is to analyze job descriptions. And we wanted to be able to tell the educators what kind of skill sets people need in the field. And the work actually started with a patient by a couple of years ago, and she put together, when she was at Emory University, a series of job descriptions for evaluators there. And it really was kind of the impetus for me looking at it locally and doing the same kind of thing. So what did we do? Every week or so, we get an email from AEA with 10 job postings. We've grabbed those. We've grabbed job postings from LinkedIn, and our own local community, the Alamo City Evaluators, have sent me job descriptions that they want, job openings that they want sent out to other people. And so we collected a number of job descriptions. We have close to 130, I think, sitting in our pool. And we've analyzed some of them. We created a code book based on the AEA competencies, and I'll show you some examples in a moment. And then we're using Deduce to do the coding. So collected the job descriptions from a variety of sources, created the code book, and then we're analyzing them using Deduce. So here's an example. On the left-hand side are the code book statements that we used. On the right are the AEA competencies. And so those that are in black, what we did was just reworded them to be a little bit shorter so that it would work and deduce a little bit more. Like 2.3 is designs credible and feasible evaluations. We put it as just design evaluations. And the things in the red, though, are things we had to add. The AEA competencies are not specific enough for us to code all of the statements. So the AEA competency is 2.10 collects data here, but we wanted to break it down into what kinds of tools are they using, survey tools, doing interviews or focus groups, searching databases, and so on. And then in the right hand are the examples that we were looking for. So we had to extend the AEA competencies to doing a decent job of analyzing the statements. This is the good one. We really don't know who we are. We have analyzed 105 job descriptions, the job titles. 99 of them are unique. There are 99 different job titles in 105 job descriptions. On the left-hand side are those who are kind of the doers, the specialists, the officers, the evaluators, the technicians. Our typical ones on the right-hand side are the evaluation leadership. But if you notice, there's a pattern. On the left-hand side, you can take the word specialist, and then there are descriptors in front of it. If you look at evaluators, there's executive program evaluator, MEL case study evaluator. So what we have done is taken those job descriptions and come up with kind of like a core. If you look on the right-hand side, the same pattern exists. There's a director, and it's director of something. And so director of learning, director of evaluation. And when you look at just those core words, then the number of job descriptions falls to about, or job titles falls to about 12. So there is a pattern that we want to analyze further down the road. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Azisana, who has done all of these codings and will walk through these different slides. And Azisana, when you want me to go to the next slide, just let me know.
Yes, thank you. So just as a preface, we have on the left side the competencies based on AEA and then the percentage of job descriptions. Again, like we coded 97 of these. And this first one is professional practice, which talks about the domain talks about focusing on what makes evaluators distinct as practicing professionals. So just grounding the work based on the AEA with foundational documents, including the program evaluation standards and the AEA guideline principles. So here on the red are the ones that are least coded, which was surprising to see at 1.2 that they're talking about the foundational documents adopted by AEA. So it's interesting that's one of the competencies, but you don't really see it in the job descriptions. So I wonder whether it's just that nobody's really explicit about it, or if it's just kind of vague in the statements. You see a lot of theoretical foundations asking to making for evaluators to have those theoretical foundations and the background work, but not necessarily tying it to AEA. And as well as advocating for the field of evaluation and its value, that we had zero codes on that. And really, I think it's also just a very vague statement. That's also why we decided to add a lot of different ones throughout as we were coding, since it wasn't as explicit. And I think that you can't really ask your evaluators or those that are your applicants something as specific as this. Sometimes it's more on the methodological side. But here in this section, the ones that are most coded were 1.1, which is acting ethically towards evaluation practice, showing integrity, respecting people of different cultural backgrounds. This also touched base on knowing theoretical frameworks such as culturally responsive evaluation, and just in general being culturally aware of different backgrounds and understanding how to navigate different stakeholders. We also see the 1.7, which is pursuing ongoing professional development. I think we see this more in the job descriptions that were in academia. So looking at presenting at different conferences, publishing different papers, as well as just more general statements as staying relevant within the evaluation world, whatever methodologies are currently, making sure that we're still reading within like the journals and staying afloat within the practices of right now. Kurt, can you go to the other slide? The second domain is methodology. So this is the one we see coded the most. I think it's more explicit, and these are the ones where we identified a lot of different ones, which is talking about like quantitative, qualitative, and mixed designs for learning and understanding your evaluation practice. Here we see the 2.5, which is again the least one, which is identifying assumptions that underlie methodologies and program logic. I think it just, again, it comes to like being explicit of what you can ask for your applicant and then what maybe could be covered more within like an interview. So this really isn't something that was coded as often, but what we see the most is designing your evaluations, whether it be the purposes or the questions, as well as just being able to determine what are the appropriate methods for specific evaluations and specific research questions that are being found throughout the process. We also see program logic and program theory as appropriate within like 46% of most of the job descriptions. And that's kind of like logic models and just other different frameworks that are used within the evaluation world. On the next slide, again, methodology is like really lengthy. So we see a lot more here, and we're talking about data collection and data analysis, which is the ones that are like the most prominent within the job descriptions. These are some of the stuff that we also added using like survey tools, interviews, and focus groups, just to be a little more specific on what these job descriptions were asking, not necessarily trying to be as vague. So the 2.1 is the one that is just within base the AEA competency, which is just collecting data using credible, feasible, and culturally appropriate procedures. But we also added this one to encompass instrument development. So that's also something that was coded a lot throughout these job descriptions. We also have the data analysis, which also covers different skills like data visualization, using statistical analysis tools, whether it be R or Python, using text analysis tools, which were like Deduce, the same one that we're using right now. And we also have interpreting findings, using evidence to draw conclusions, which were all part of going into like the report writing stages when we find a lot of the analysis. So all of these work together, and mostly they were coded within the same job description based on like the procedures that they would want the evaluator to follow. The one that was least coded was the identifying strengths and limitations of the evaluation design and methods. Again, I think it's also just not as explicit, but I think it's part of the role. But the skill set that were focusing most on were the collecting data and analyzing data. On the next slide.
Hang on. One of the
Yes.
things that we were surprised at, report writing does not appear explicitly in the AEA competencies. And yet that's what we all do.
Yeah.
We're working with our customers, but it wasn't there. The closest we could find was using evidence. Okay.
Yeah, those drawing conclusion ones that fit in within like report writing, but it wasn't necessarily report writing, which is really interesting to see. This is the third domain, which is context, and it focuses on understanding like unique circumstances, multiple perspectives, changing settings, so different contexts such as like site, location, environment, your stakeholders, the organization, and so on, as you can see like within the top. And I think the way that we thought about this too was when we were reading on how a lot of these job descriptions were talking about specific knowledge or specific background experience within certain domains. So that we see here in 3.11, responding to a specific domain like healthcare, social justice, the education world, knowing how to navigate, whether it be like data sets within the healthcare industry or talking about different experiences in the government sector, nonprofits, foundations. So this is kind of integrating both context and experience together. And we also have a lot within the 3.2, which is just engaging diverse range of users and stakeholders throughout the process. So this is just another aspect of who you're working with and like the context that your evaluation is like being grounded on. And communicating evaluation processes and results in a timely and effective ways. I think this one was a little confusing since at first we talked about how it would make more sense within like the methodologies, but the way that we thought about this one was when you talk about like reporting in meetings, making sure that you're ready to present, whether in different modes, whether it be not just report writing, but also whether it just be like weekly meetings where you just kind of discuss what are the current updates for the evaluation process as a whole, and not necessarily just like the data collection process. So you talk about like different aspects. And that's the one that got coded the most in this section. And the one that didn't was the attends to system issues within the context. So that's zero codes at all. I think again, a lot of these are very vague, and it was very difficult to see how that was going to work out within like the responsibilities of the applicants for the job descriptions.
One of the things I wanted to point out is for 3.11 response to specific domains, we did not go down to code which ones we had. Like, so we didn't have a separate code for healthcare and a separate code for social justice or a separate code for education, because we figured it would be just part of the sample that we got. And so we just kept it at, we coded for if they called out a specific domain in that job description. Okay, next.
Yes, this next one is the domain for planning and management, which focuses on determining and monitoring work plans, timelines, resources, and other components that are needed to complete and deliver an evaluation study. So this also includes networking, developing proposals, contracting, determining work assignments, and just monitoring progress as a whole. So we have different ones within this like management and planning section. The first one is like negotiating and managing feasible evaluation plan, budget, and resources, which we see a lot. I think this is just like the bigger part of managing the evaluation as a whole. Again, it includes like so many different aspects, such as also like safeguarding like evaluation data and keeping it confidential. So it was working with a lot of different data sets, but mostly on that aspect of keeping it safe and making sure that it stays confidential and not leaking it to like other people that shouldn't be seeing it. We also see some general ones, which is 4.5, coordinating and supervising evaluation processes and products. But we also included as an additive coordinating meetings or coordinating groups of people within the job. So it could also be like a leadership position as well as being able to teach others the aspects of what you as the job applicant are learning. So disseminating some of that data and some of that knowledge. Some of the other ones that are covered here that we see a lot was collaboration. So they always were talking about the way that you collaborate within within the job sector. So you're teaming with others to make different changes within the evaluation process, as well as just monitoring going back, since it's always going to be about quality and progress. So making sure that we're making adjustments throughout the evaluation process and working with stakeholders to build capacity. I really enjoyed the 4.9 one, since we see that it wasn't just in-house, so building in-house capacity, whether it be disseminating some of your knowledge, whether it be working through like workshops to understand different processes, but also within your stakeholders and just being able to mobilize your own community. So some of those coded job descriptions included such statements like that. And as well as technology, especially now that we're like moving towards a more tech-based like eval, we have different ways of presenting our information, different ways of disseminating data. So that also followed within that aspect. And something that we didn't really see in this area was the addressing aspects of culture and planning and managing evaluations. I don't think it was really specifically stated for the job descriptions. If I can remember one of them, I think that it just covered something in the base of like understanding like the culture of the workplace and your stakeholders, which was as close as that as we can get into that aspect. I don't know, Kurt, if you saw anything else within this 4.21.
No, nope, you covered it.
Yeah. So the next slide, I think, is just the final one, which is, well, the final one for the AEA competency ones, the sections, they have 5 different ones. And this one is interpersonal. So we're looking at human relations, social interactions, as well as just different interpersonal skills, including like cultural competence, communication, facilitation, and conflict resolution. So here, the ones that we see the most was communicating in meaningful ways that enhance the effectiveness of the evaluation. I really enjoyed this one, again, since it covered so many different ways of communicating with your stakeholders and within like your job, whether it be finding ways to disseminate data that are less tech-based. So as we see like evaluators, we really are strong within like our methodology, and we use terminology that might not be as like digestible for our stakeholders. So a lot of the coded areas were about that, like being able to present our data in more digestible ways so that it's understandable, and also through different like platforms, whether it be like data visualization or just different methods so that we can see like visuals, but also like explaining like in like easier like terminology. So that focused a lot on like 5.6. And then 5.1 was talking about just in general, like fostering like positive relationships within like your professional practice, but also with the community that you're working with, and being able to make long-term like relationships to make the evaluation practice more effective, and just building on that like community practice. The one that was least coded for this one was attending like the ways for power and privilege and the way that they affect evaluation practice. I think this one just really isn't something that you can measure within like the job descriptions, or something that you can necessarily like just like, oh, like do you attend to like power and privilege when you're like in an interview? I think this will be mostly seen once you're working through like the actual job and understanding like the environment that you're working with, and maybe in choosing like the type of methodology that you might work through for your stakeholders, and understanding like how that's going to affect like your practice. But I don't think that it's something that you can measure right off like through a job description or to an interview. So this is mostly that interpersonal area. These are other ones that we added. So the education, again, these as it's stated there, they're not mutually exclusive. Some positions like have the bachelor's of arts and bachelor of science like minimum like required, but also they can include other aspects like master's preferred or PhD preferred. So this is just kind of a glimpse of what kind of degrees that they were looking for. I think it's really important so that we understand as evaluators, like, okay, what kind of things should we be meeting? Should we be getting bachelor? Should we move on to like a doctoral, depending on what is really necessary within the field? Which is interesting to see that PhD, although it was like preferred, it was a lot less than seeing that as your master's. So I think since it's more practice based, it might not need as extensive like education, but it's still valuable. And a lot of these were requiring experience in degrees related to evaluation, whether it be having quant classes, whether it be in lieu of like psychology, different realms that really fit within evaluation. So we see that coded a lot within the job descriptions. And for the terms of like the years of experience, um, I think for most of them, they would give a range, like, oh, you should have at least 3 to 5 experiences, like minimum, for evaluation related like activities. And sometimes it would also mention whether, like, if you had a bachelor's, then you would need more years of experience in the evaluation world. But if you had a master's, then they would also include, like, okay, if you have a master's, then you can decrease the amount of years that you're working within the practice since you have like a higher degree within a related field. So we see that a lot here in the years of experience.
Okay, one thing I wanted to point out on the previous slides, we had green was the skill sets that were highly coded. On this slide, the greens go together. So in many of ours would say you need a BS or a BA minimum, but an MA is preferred. So those two green ones were often cited. The two blue ones that you needed a master's degree as a minimum, but they preferred a PhD. So I just wanted to explain that color coding. The two colors kind of go together. And then we saw a lot where they did require the experience. We did not code the trade-off that Azucena just said, where it could be a degree and X number of years of experience or a higher degree and fewer years of experience. We didn't get into that level of coding. Okay. Azucena, do you
Yes.
want to do this one?
Yeah, of course. This is just a quick snippet of how it looks for the competencies. So we see them in the top section, like the methods and then, like how many times they were coded throughout the job description. So you can see the different titles that Kerr was talking about, like data analyst, program evaluator, and associate, and business. And they had so many different titles. But what really matters here is just understanding like the way that it was being coded within these job descriptions. Some of them had I think we talked about it like in the beginning. It was just really difficult sometimes to code some of these since they could be like vague statements, but we try to keep within the bigger chunks of like whether this falls under methods, whether this falls under like planning and management. So this is just a quick snippet of the way that it was looking once we finished like the competencies.
So the long-term goal here is to get enough cases in our database where we can do a cluster analysis so that we can start to see if there are clusters of skills called for in job descriptions that would point out to, okay, this cluster of skill sets points to somebody who's an evaluator that does it. And another cluster points out to a manager. Maybe a third cluster points out to a director. I don't know if we're going to be able to get clusters or not. But it may be that we get two big clusters. One is the doers and one is the managers, leadership kind of positions. So we're not at that point yet, but we're getting close to being able to try a cluster analysis to see if we can, from the job descriptions, come up with some kind of pattern. Okay. I'll take this one. So why is this important? For the educators, we want them to know and to align their certificate programs, their courses, their seminars, and workshops towards skills that are needed in the field. So if we're working with a nonprofit and they have two people that are going to be doing evaluations, they need those skill sets that are focused on methodology. My running joke is I need people who know how to do pivot tables in Excel. That's the kind of skill set I'm looking for. And so we can tell educators that, yes, the theory and the frameworks are good. I think that's still a critical point, but I need people who can do it. I need people who understand interviewing skills and have experience in that and building a good survey, and so on. So we can tell the educators, what is it that the field is actually asking for? For the consumers, like the nonprofits, we can tell them more about what kind of professional development they might need. They may not be thinking about other things other than doing, this person is to build surveys, this person is to create interviews and write up a report. And they may not be thinking about data visualization or the planning and management of it. I wonder how many of you have had this where your customer wants to sit down and start writing survey items in the first session without really planning what are the objectives, what are the goals. And so there's that whole process of thinking about what is it that you want to measure before you start writing survey questions. And that's a skill set that the consumers may not know, those folks who are not trained out in the nonprofit world. So we can help them find out what kind of professional development they need, but also just for self-directed. Here's a skill set I don't have that I might need. And then for the evaluation community, we've seen some pretty weak job descriptions, that they're not very clear as to what they're asking for. Some of them are really well done, but we want them to improve their hiring practices, better job descriptions, better RFPs, and so on. And then for AEA on the feedback, for those items that we flagged in red, where not many job descriptions have posted them, we don't want you to walk away with the feeling of those are bad competencies and they should take them off the books. I think it's more of we need to let the community know that these are competencies that they may want to include in job descriptions. So I don't think the competencies are bad. I think it's just people don't know about them in their when they're writing job descriptions. Okay, here's the slide that Matt wants. This is actually a park in San Antonio. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, our tower that's downtown, and that actually is, but it's perfect for raising questions. Okay, your turn.
All right, well, before we break and go to the open thing, I have a couple questions for you. So Kurt, you own Steuck and Associates LLC, and you hire people, obviously. As Asana, I appreciate your contributions. This is amazing. Now, from your perspective, Kurt, when you go to hire somebody and you're putting together a job description, how does all this information inform your process of developing a job description for advertising and recruiting people?
We ignore it. No, it is one that we're looking for experience in the skill sets, but also in the domain, because my company works primarily in the education sector. I've had employees and consultants that have been in other domains like public health, but they end up working in education. And so having that background of education would make a difference. So we do look at things like their experience level, their degrees, whether they have a certificate or not. So those kind of things would go into the job descriptions. I can't write a job description with every AEA competency in it. And so we do have to do, if I'm looking at an entry level person, I'm going to be looking at those that understand the methodology more. If I'm looking at somebody that has a PhD and some years of experience, I'm looking for their experience in the domain, but also, their ability to communicate with a variety of stakeholders, a variety of the people in the field. So that idea of project management and working with customers becomes more important with the more advanced stages. I wouldn't expect somebody at an entry level to have a lot of experience working with customers at that point. But somebody who's been in the field for a number of years, I would want more of that management and customer relations kind of experience.
So to summarize what you just said, this process would inform you, but you'd also to kind of take a different approach to developing your job descriptions.
Yeah. I laughed because in the past we didn't have job descriptions. We're in the process of writing them. And because the company is growing a little bit, we'll have more of a graduated level of job categories. And so we do want to tailor the job descriptions toward those categories. So we're becoming more formalized in the way we're doing it.
And I can imagine that for any of us who are, because we're revisiting our job descriptions internally as we're growing and developing and thinking about how people can progress and how we can continue to keep people with our firm for their whole career, perhaps, which would be amazing. And we would love it as much as hopefully they would too. How do we create that? And so a lot of thought goes into our job descriptions around those things. I think there has to be a process of taking your work and using that to inform a broader process of creating job descriptions. I mean, we start people at a research assistant, and then they go to associate researcher and senior researcher and then director, and they could become principal. And so that's the process of moving through the lines of different things you can do in our firm. And we think about different categories of things that they might be doing and how that changes from position and increases. And so I think there's got to be a way to think about what you've done and have that inform these processes.
Yes.
We'll get there. We're on our way.
Well, one
right,
of the things
go
that
ahead.
we did was our initial job descriptions had the titles with researcher in it. And now we're putting in evaluator. So senior evaluator rather than senior researcher. Subtle difference, but helps identify the skill sets a little bit more.
You think it identifies the skill sets a little more? So how do you separate those things? Because that's definitely a conversation for us as well.
I need people with if the person has research experience, I still count it as being something that's relevant. Where we get into it is with evaluation, you've got the goals and statements coming from the customer. Those are different than pure research that we might see in a university, where you're trying to find the cause and effect relationship. So the skill sets, though, of collecting data, analyzing data, those still fit. It's just the nature of the question that we're addressing that changes. And so they have to be sensitive to that difference.
I
I think
understand.
it's part of it's just the advertising. We're evaluators. Let's have evaluation in our job description rather than the researcher.
I've got a ton more questions. I'm going to try and resist.
Do you want to stop the recording?
I have no, because I got a couple things I definitely want to ask you that are not so hard, hard hitting. First of all, I want to ask Azu-san if she had any kind of reflections on just this whole process and her involvement with it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed coding. I think that since I'm going to graduate in December, it also made everything so much more confusing since the job descriptions and the titles were just, it was so sporadic and things just didn't align so much with like the competencies. And that's mainly where a lot of my training is going towards. So I'm also an evaluation assistant at one of the Centers for Education Evaluation like research at U of M at the University of Michigan. And I think it's just really difficult to like take classes and see the competencies, but then really looking at the job descriptions is just very different. So but again, like kind of like what Kurt said, it's not so much about like dismissing like the competencies, but understand that maybe as like a community we should be more aware of these competencies and integrating them into like the job descriptions. But it's really interesting.
So last question for Kurt. I know you're a big bike rider. When you get out on a bike ride and you're hanging out with a new person who's just getting to meet you and you say, yeah, I'm an evaluator. And they say, what's that? What's your answer, Kurt? How do we answer this question?
Because I work in the field of education, I simply say I do research in education. And people understand that more than if I say the evaluator. So I work in schools, I work with school districts, the K-12, I work with higher education, I work with nonprofits that are in the education space or in the STEM space. So I have to put it into layperson's terms, and typically the layperson understands research. Evaluation's different. So it's typically that's good enough. And if they ask for more questions, then I get into more of the details about who we're working with and what we're doing and what our reports look like, the kinds of things that we're putting in reports. So I'll get into more details if they start following up with questions. But the 30-second is I do research in education.
Very good. Well, I'm going to stop recording here for everybody to kind of chime in with their questions and thoughts and reflections. But with that, YouTube people, we'll see y'all later. All the people live, stick around.